Today, Iraq ordered all American arms inspectors to leave the country immediately. President Clinton did not hesitate to respond.
Iraq's announcement this morning to expel the Americans from the inspection team is clearly unacceptable and a challenge to the international community. Let me remind you all again, I will say this every time I discuss this issue. These inspectors in the last 6 years have uncovered more weapons of mass destruction potential and destroyed it than was destroyed in the entire Gulf War. It is important to the safety of the world that they continue their work. I intend to pursue this matter in a very determined way.
The president called an emergency meeting of his foreign policy advisors this afternoon. Meanwhile, the United Nations announced it would withdraw all its weapons inspectors from Iraq. The UN Security Council also met this afternoon to discuss its next course of action in the impending crisis. Joining me now, Iraqi Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz, and I am pleased to have him on this broadcast. Thank you for coming.
Hello, sir.
First, your response to what the president said today and repeated in every public appearance he has made or every interview he has done about this crisis, that they have discovered more weapons of mass destruction by the UN monitors than were used in the Gulf War.
Well, I think he said that they have destroyed more weapons than they did during the war. That's correct. I do not disagree with him. But when we speak about this crisis, I think his government is responsible for that crisis. And if he wants to avoid a crisis and return to the normalcy, they should not stand against the legitimate concerns and grievances of Iraq, which were presented to the members of the Security Council through the Secretary General of the United Nations. We have serious concerns, we have serious grievances, we have legitimate requests. First of all, of those requests is the lifting of sanctions. The sanctions have been imposed since 1990. They have gone on for 7 years or more, and there is no end to in prospect for lifting the sanctions.
Let me interrupt you there. Is it, from your perspective and from your leader's perspective, this whole crisis is about your judgment that these sanctions will never be removed?
Well, that's the truth.
You've got to do something to provoke a crisis, to do something about the sanctions.
No, we did not provoke a crisis, but the situation is that after
deny American inspectors an opportunity to do what they've been doing, then
we have our reasons
for
that, Mr. Rose. We have our reasons, our good reasons for that. The sanctions have continued for 6.5 years without any prospect of lifting them, because the technical procedure of lifting the sanctions should be as follows. The Special Commission reporting to the Security Council that it has finished its job in dismantling Iraq's prohibited weapons. The Special Commission has been working, as the President has said, for 6.5 years. Until now, it says that I have not finished my job. The reason behind that is that the Special Commission is dominated by the Americans. The American government does not want to lift the sanctions, and they implement their government's position.
Dominate in what way?
Dominated in...
Not in terms of numbers.
In terms of numbers, in terms of the percentage. The percentage is the highest one among all other nationalities. Throughout 6.5 years, the percentage of the American presence in the Special Commission has been more than 20%. This year, 1997, it's 32%. Last year, 1996, it was 44%. And they dominate the most important and sensitive positions in the Special Commission. They carry out the most sensitive and important activities of UNSCOM inside Iraq. So UNSCOM is the United States.
This argument, you have come to the United States, and you make it on this program, you made it on CNN, you made it with Ted Koppel. You make it. It is the argument essentially that the Americans are dominating the process, which the Americans obviously reject, and they point to the fact that the Security Council doesn't seem to accept that idea because they're prepared to act as they did yesterday. Let me come to another news.
In this matter, there isn't unanimity. The Security Council...
There is unanimity on what matter?
On the matter of the American presence and the American role in the Special Commission.
There is not unanimity on the matter that you allege, which is that the Americans are dominating this for their own ends, and that there is no useful function served by the monitoring.
No, you have to be precise on that. The Security Council unanimously didn't accept expelling the Americans from UNSCOM, but they do realize that the Americans have quite an extraordinary role in this, in the work of UNSCOM, and their role is not equal to the role of the others. And this is not fully endorsed. There are members in the Council who acknowledge this fact, and they are uneasy about it.
Who are they?
I'm not going to tell names.
Because they're not stepping forward to say that.
No, they are saying that in the deliberations of the Security Council, and the deliberations between me and them, and in the discussions among members, not in the official meetings of the Security Council in the open. But they are. This is a very important issue which is being discussed, being thought of before and in this crisis.
Then, today, the UN Security Council met this afternoon to talk about the next move in the crisis. You said, or hinted at least, that your government might shut down what remains of the UN monitoring operation if the non-Americans were withdrawn. Will you do that?
No, I didn't say that we will shut down. We didn't say that. On the contrary, we said that we will continue cooperating with UNSCOM. If the Americans leave and the others stay in Baghdad, then we will fully cooperate with them to perform their duties and their activities. It's Mr. Butler who decided to withdraw the others.
But I'm just saying, if they all are withdrawn, will you shut down what remains of the UN monitoring?
No.
So you're not threatening to do that?
No, I didn't say that.
What will you do if all of the UN inspectors are withdrawn? All of them?
Nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Okay. There are these Americans who argue the following, Mr. Minister. This is a win-win for your government so far. Number one, you have, in a sense, embarrassed the United States. Number two, you have attempted and perhaps have raised the possibility of some division among the allies, although other people say you haven't done that. And number three, you have given your government an opportunity to do what it might want to do without having inspectors present to witness what you wanted to do. So therefore, if you wanted to engage your program and improve your program of weapons of mass destruction, you have succeeded.
There isn't any program of weapons. And
not nerve gas, not anything.
Not anything. And those who tell the contrary are liars, especially those who are in UNSCOM, because they know exactly that we don't have any instruments, any equipment, any precursors that could produce such weapons.
And any intent to produce such weapons.
No intent to do it. They know that very well.
Why do you think?
Secondly, if you allow me to elaborate on that. Secondly, we ask UNSCOM to stay. There are 6 individuals now of American nationality. The others could stay and check if we are doing that or not. Third, we are not seeking division between the 5 permanent members. We are not seeking that. That's not our game. We are not a superpower to play that game.
But you would like to see that happen because you would like to engage with the Russians and you would like to engage with the French. And
we would like every member in the Security Council, every nation in this world, to understand our concerns and grievances, whether they are permanent members, non-permanent members, people outside the Security Council, we would like everybody, every individual, to understand that enough is enough. Enough is enough. For 6.5 years, the ANSCOM has been doing the job of disarmament. It strongly tells the Security Council that it hasn't finished its job, and that means more deaths, more grievances, more hardships, more ordeal to the Iraqi people. This has to stop. This policy of actually genocide has to stop in Iraq.
What you're calling genocide, the sanctions against Iraq,
Yes.
when your government has been charged with the kind of cruelties and genocide that it's been accused of, sanctions are genocide?
Sanctions are genocide because they cause the death of thousands of people.
And when you look at what happened to the Kurds, and when you've looked at what's happened under the guise of your own...
Well, there's a lot of fabrications in this world, and many fabrications have been done against Iraq. And there are no impartial witnesses who have reported. This is part of the campaign against Iraq, which was used to justify the unjust war against Iraq that was waged in 1991. It's being used as a justification for the present policies against Iraq. If you come to Baghdad, and we will take you to the Kurdish area, and you can see the facts yourself.
If everything you say is true, why are you trying to thwart the Americans, other than you think that it's to the American inspectors and embarrass the American government and create a confrontation, other than your well-said point of view that it is simply an effort by the Americans to continue the sanctions?
Well, they are responsible, because as long as they are dominating ANSCOM, they are not going to tell the truth to the Security Council. What we asked is that let us have a balanced representation of all members of the Security Council, of all permanent members. We said, let us have an ANSCOM where the French, the Russians, the Chinese, as well as the Americans and the British have an equal footing. Why should the Americans take all the important positions? Why they should dominate the activities of ANSCOM? This is a UN agency. This is a UN organ. It's not a United States organ.
And the United States is a democracy, and in the United Nations, every member state is perfectly free and its representatives to step forward and say not to be dominated by the United States, and it happens every day in the United Nations, to step forward and criticize the United States activities on the part of its inspection team, and that's not happening. And you're not having people claiming, members of that inspection team, that the Americans are dominating. And the Americans have a point of view that's different from the others. That's simply not happening.
That's the fact. We have facts and figures. Facts and figures.
But why wouldn't the members of the inspection team, if that argument was correct, be complaining? And they're not. And they are supportive of the Americans on that inspection team.
Well, the other members in the Security Council have said and have mentioned that the Americans are dominating ANSCOM, and they are uneasy about it. If they disagree with us on one point, that they do not endorse our decision to expel the Americans at this moment, they do agree with us to a certain extent that, yes, your argument that the Americans are dominating ANSCOM is true, because it's a fact.
There's an old notion in this dialogue and discussion, which you as a diplomat know much better than I do as a journalist, which is that you can go a long way by making your questions the center of the agenda. So if the agenda becomes a question of American domination or not, then it seems to me that you're operating on the false question. The real question is, what's going on inside of Iraq, and what is the intention of Iraq in terms of its neighbors? Does Iraq, for example, still have weapons of destruction? None at all.
We don't have
none are in development.
Any weapons. There isn't any activity that has been traced.
Then you have
for
nothing.
Several.
Then you and your government and Saddam Hussein have nothing to hide. You have nothing to be afraid of from the Americans or anyone else.
We have nothing to hide.
Let them come to your country and see everything.
They have done that.
And see everything, and then you can have a much stronger point of view to argue if you let them inspect
They
when
have done
want it.
that.
But that's not
they
the
have
testimony.
done that, but they have not reported faithfully, truthfully to the Security Council.
And Mr. Butler is a liar if he says otherwise.
I don't call names.
Who
but
were you
he's
calling a
not
liar,
correct.
though? You just said somebody was a liar.
I'm not mentioning names, you see, but generally, ANSCOM, those who dominate ANSCOM, they lie to the world. They lie to the Security Council. Their lies have not been verified by the Security Council in a proper manner. They
Have not been verified.
Yes. They have been used, those lies have been used as an excuse to keep the sanctions.
Do you think
I invited, let me elaborate on that. I invited in 2 letters sent to the Security Council experts who represent 5 permanent members to come and check those fabrications. You should remember that last year, this time, Mr. Akios was telling the world that Iraq is concealing an operational missile force. Isn't mentioned now? The answer is no. Why? Because through a process of technical means and ways, through a process of laboratory analysis, which started in April this year, till August, it was shown that the Iraqi statement about the non-existence of an operational missile force is correct. And that is reported in the last report of the executive chairman. So the lies which were floating last year, similar to the lies which are being floated this year about CW and BW, the first lie has been exposed as untrue, not through inspections, not through Sherlock Holmes means, but through the technical and scientific examination of those lies. Now, you can easily reach the conclusion whether there is or there isn't prohibited weapons, because there are scientific and technical means to verify that. But what they are using...
You're not allowing them to do that.
We are allowing them this year, since April till October, 700 activities of inspections took place in Iraq. But you are misinformed. You are misinformed. You are making generalities. 700 activities of inspections, of verifications, of interviews took place in the last 6 months. There were only 6 incidents, less than 100%, when those inspectors were not allowed. They came to our sovereign and presidential sites, and we would not allow an American spy.
And I understand that issue.
I cannot allow an American spy to enter into the presidential palace, which is a target of American aggression to assassinate Saddam Hussein. Do you accept that?
I do. That's a valid issue. Yes, that's a valid issue. That's a valid issue.
In the Cold War, would you accept a KGB spy to enter the White House and
Absolutely
the residence of the
or
President of the United States?
Or to go to the CIA. You wouldn't accept him?
To update you, his information to kill your president? You cannot accept that. They have been doing 700 activities inside the country. They have inspected and visited hundreds of units, of military units, hundreds of factories, hundreds of warehouses, hundreds of universities, schools, monasteries, churches, etc., etc., and that's not enough.
Let me repeat what you're saying. Let me hear what you're saying. You're saying we've allowed you to expect a lot of stuff to find out as much as you want to find, but we're not going to let you go to where our national security apparatus is. We're not going to let you invade what is legitimate state secrets.
Read my letters to the Security Council. That's my point.
Some will say you lost the war. You lost the war, and you don't dictate the terms.
We went through a war, and the war stopped. We did not lose a war.
It
and
mercifully stopped for you.
It stopped. It stopped. It stopped. We did not request Mr. Bush to stop it. He decided to stop it.
Out
That's
of
his
compassion,
decision.
Because
compassion, who killed the children, who destroyed the electrical stations.
It was a turkey shoot along the roads back to Baghdad, and you know that. I mean, they called that war within 24 hours because...
Was it a courageous act, you see, to kill withdrawing forces? He killed our forces when they were withdrawing from Kuwait.
Was it courageous to do what took place in Kuwait?
Well,
that wasn't... I mean,
a war is a war, but it's not courageous.
And to burn the oil wells as you left, was that courageous?
But it's not courageous and honorable to an army to kill and attack soldiers when they are withdrawing.
Well, it's less courageous to do what happened to the people of Kuwait when they were
What
invaded.
happened to the people of Kuwait? They are better off than you.
They what?
They are better off than you.
Because
nothing.
Nothing happened to them. In other words, they are as safe and as secure and living better than I'm living. Is that the point?
Yes.
Right. Let me talk about the future. Are you worried that the United States, there are a lot of people are saying the following. This happens to be from one conservative American magazine. Saddam must go.
That's none of the business of the United States.
That's what I want to hear you out on.
The man who is writing this bill. Saddam is the leader of Iraq. It's up to the people of Iraq to decide who their leader should be. It's not up to the State Department or the White House or the Pentagon to decide on that. We have been seeing and reading this nonsense you see for 6 or 7 years, and President Saddam Hussein is in his place. He is supported by his people, trusted by his people, and he will remain until God decides and the people of Iraq decide, not the American editors, not the American government.
I was surprised over the weekend to see on American weekend news and public affairs programs, which you appeared on or witnessed, the notion of people saying, almost saying, I wish someone would do something about, not Iraq, Saddam Hussein.
Where
in other words, people were appearing on public programs.
Here?
Yes, in the United States.
Yeah, they want to dictate.
They want to see him eliminated. That sentiment was reflected.
Is that moral?
No.
Is that ethical? So is this, do you justify?
Do you understand that, though? I mean, do you see that there is such a kind of revulsion
here in the United States
against
the establishment here in the United States? But the establishment in the United States, Charlie, does not decide the fate of Iraq, does not choose the leader of Iraq. Saddam Hussein was not brought by the American forces to the leadership of Iraq. He came to the leadership of Iraq by his own means and ways, with the support of the Iraqi people, with the support of the Iraqi army, and nobody is going to change that because Mr. So-and-so in the United States doesn't like Saddam Hussein. We might not like this or that leader in your country, but doesn't mean that we decide whom you should choose for your president, for your Secretary of State. This is none of our business.
I understand the question of sovereignty, and that's an appropriate point for you to raise. Why do you, the Deputy Foreign Minister, a man known to Americans, support this leader with such...
I believe in him. He is my friend. He is my colleague. We have been working together for more than a quarter century for the benefit of our nation. I do support him. I do respect him. I do trust him. And I do love him, you see, as a friend. We are in very good terms on the personal basis. Saddam Hussein serves faithfully and devotedly the interest of Iraq. That's why you don't like him. You would like to have a proxy, you see, in Iraq who would say yes
you being the United States government,
yes,
or the United States.
Yeah. You would like to pick an agent.
Yeah, I think that you could argue that the majority opinion of the United States, and perhaps the opinion of the government, which I don't speak for, would be they would like to see a change of leadership in Iraq for a lot of very good reasons.
We would also like to say a change of policy in the United States towards Iraq, but we cannot dictate that.
And that change of policy you would like to see is an elimination...
Not in terms of persons.
Elimination of the sanctions, which you egregiously call genocide. An elimination of the sanctions. That's the change of policy you'd like to see. And this whole debate, from your standpoint, is about that. What can we do to get these sanctions eliminated so we can sell our oil and get on with...
Just be fair. Just be fair. Don't be hegemonic. Don't falsify the truth, the facts. Be fair. Be fair. That Iraq has done this. It has implemented what requirements were made in the Security Council resolutions. And don't block lifting the sanctions. If the U.S. government decides not to interfere in the Security Council business against Iraq, the sanctions will be lifted within weeks.
The sanctions are only there, in your judgment, because the United States government uses its influence to get the sanctions maintained.
Yes.
As you know, if sitting here was a Secretary of Defense Cohen, the head of the CIA, the National Security Advisor, they would say that what you have said, I assume, I can't speak for them, what you have said about Iraq's intent and deed with respect to weapons of mass destruction, what you have said is a lie. That's what they would say. Don't you agree?
I don't agree with them.
You don't think they would say that, though? They would say...
I don't know what they will say, you see, and what terms they are going to use. But I will say to them, and I am saying that in public, and I am responsible for my statement, we do not have any prohibited weapons. They have
and we have no desire to acquire them by any means.
Yes.
We don't want to be a nuclear power. We don't want to have either germ warfare abilities that we can use as a threat.
We have been destroyed, and we do not intend to continue their production because we would like the sanctions to be lifted. And we know that this is a requirement for lifting the sanctions, and we have done all these requirements.
As you know, and I want to leave sanctions for a second because we had some other important things to talk about in terms of the future. As you know, what they would say, if you want to participate in the community of nations, just abide by the laws of the international community. Just do what was agreed to do. And they say you didn't, and therefore the battle is there.
We did.
You say we have, they say you haven't. They say here's our evidence, and you say
that's why, because
you say it's all the Americans'
fault. They
want
to keep the sanctions because keeping the sanctions on Iraq is a profitable business for the United States.
It's profit motive that...
Yes, yes. Iraq has been excluded from the oil market, and the share of Iraq is being sold by others, and those who are selling our share in the oil market are making contracts with the Americans.
So now you're saying American foreign policy is dictated by its economic interests with respect to oil income.
That's simple. Everybody knows that. That's a very well-known fact.
You might argue that the United States...
Would you convince me that it's being driven by moral values?
I would argue to you that the American policy is not driven by its... It may very well, you could argue, that part of its consideration with respect to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and the defense of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia was driven by a desire to protect that oil resource. True. As well as other considerations having to do with
and they are still making profits out of that. But
I would argue that there is, and I think they would argue this, that it is in fact other reasons that dictate its policy that are beyond economic and what they think the intent of Saddam Hussein is. Let me move to the future. Do I hear you saying, Mr. President, do what you want to with your U-2s, and we'll try to shoot them down if you fly over, number one. And number two, if you launch an attack on the people of Iraq, we will withstand it, and we will do what?
We will withstand it simply because this is the natural reaction when any nation is being attacked. We will steadfastly protect our country, defend it against aggression, and do what we can do.
Did we learn any lessons from the Gulf War?
Who?
You.
Did you?
Your government. Well, I think the lessons of the United States was that in coalition with its partners, it has to stop aggression when it sees it. That was the lesson.
Well, the lesson...
What did your government learn from that war?
Well, we were attacked by a coalition of 30 nations.
Attacked?
Attacked.
That wasn't an act of defense there? That was an act of in the Gulf War.
Do you think, well, because of Kuwait?
Yes.
Why Mosul was attacked? Why Erbil was attacked? Why the electricity was attacked? Why monasteries were attacked? Why bridges were attacked?
Who initiated that conflict?
The United States.
In what way?
By attacking Iraq.
Attacking Iraq?
Yes.
The Gulf War was initiated by the United States.
Yes.
When you say that, doesn't
because we wanted to have a political solution
to
within the Arab
islands
world,
that you thought belonged
within
to you
the Arab world, many heads of state and government in the Arab world wanted to find a political solution to the problem. It was Mr. Bush who denied that, who prevented that, and who insisted on the logic of the war.
Mr. Bush is responsible for the Gulf War?
Yes.
You know, when you say that, with all respect, Mr. Minister, that it affects the credibility of the positions you argue.
That's the truth. I insist on that.
The future. What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen?
Ask that question, make that question to the American administration. Are they going to repeat the aggression against Iraq? If they are going to do that, that will complicate the situation badly. If they don't, we could find a diplomatic, political solution to this problem.
This question. If in fact you consider genocide to impose sanctions on the people of Iraq, yes? You've said that, even though there have been programs to bring food in, yes?
UN agencies are saying that. Okay. All honest men who visit Iraq and see
what UN agency has said it is genocide to impose sanctions
implicitly, if you read the reports of UNICEF or the World Food Program, etc., they are all exposing the ordeal of the Iraqi people, the death of children, the death of vulnerable groups, because they don't have enough food, they don't have enough medicine because of the sanctions. Iraq was a very prosperous nation.
Until it engaged in these sanctions. Is there no sense of accountability? Because, you know, these sanctions came about. There were no sanctions before the invasion of Kuwait, correct?
Yes.
So don't you feel any accountability and responsibility for actions that led to the imposition of the sanctions?
If we are to speak about accountability, let's speak about all the parties involved in that matter since the early 1990. Before the events of the 2nd of August, sanctions started to be imposed unilaterally by the United States on Iraq.
What options, here is the feeling in Washington as I read it. You're driving them into a corner by your actions. And they have little choice. If, in fact, you shoot at a U-2 plane, which you haven't done, but you've threatened to do, will you shoot at a U-2 plane when it flies over?
If it enters illegally into our airspace.
But how do you define illegally? If they give you notice and they're on a UN flight, is that illegal?
Would you accept that if a Cuban spying plane would give you a notice that it will come into the American airspace, and you will tolerate that? Would you tolerate that?
But
why should Iraq tolerate that? The Americans decide...
Because they're on a mission for the United Nations, not a mission for the United States.
That's a big lie. That's a big lie.
Why is that a lie?
I exposed it in front of the non-aligned caucus. I showed them where the U-2 flies in Iraq. It goes to Erbil. Does Mr. Butler have any interest in Erbil? It flows over Baghdad a couple of days before they attacked Baghdad in 1993 and in June 1993. It's not working for the United Nations. It's a spying plane. It updates information for the Pentagon and sends one or two bits and pieces of the pictures it takes for the factories in Iraq to Mr. Butler just to tell him that it's serving his own purpose. I have been asking the Special Commission to use a neutral plane. I would accept a French one. I would accept a German one. I would accept an Italian one. I would accept a Russian one. But I cannot accept an American one because they have a special agenda against Iraq.
The American flag of flying a mission for the United Nations, as I say.
I don't believe it, simply because the United States has a special agenda against Iraq. I would like the United Nations to use a plane which belongs to a country which doesn't have a special agenda against Iraq.
They don't have U-2s.
Many planes could do the same job. The F-1, the Mirage F-1, the French could do the same job. Taking pictures.
In your judgment, what's the likelihood that this crisis will end up in the use of force?
That will be a grave mistake on the
But what's the likelihood? Is it 50-50?
I don't know. Because
Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic because I am in a situation that I might be attacked by an aggression. I have to defend myself. I have to take precautions. It's up to them to decide, and if they do decide to wage a war against Iraq, they will not win. They will lose.
They won the last one.
They didn't. They didn't. They didn't. They made a lot of destruction. They killed a lot of people, but they didn't win the war. Winning or losing wars, Mr. Rose, is a very controversial issue. Don't just look at the immediate results of a military conflict. Look at the results in the long run.
What do you think the results of the long run are?
The Americans lost a lot. They lost their pretension that they are conducting a moral policy in the world. They lost a lot in the Middle East because people think of the Americans are aggressors, are cruel.
Why then did the United States, the only government that I know that was supporting you were the Jordanians, and the Jordanians were have since changed their mind, it seems to me. King Hussein is on has a different take, and the PLO, and I don't see Mr. Arafat having, coming out with a lot of statements having to do with this conflict. So who lost prestige and who lost the most in that conflict?
The prestige in terms of power, I'm not saying that the United States has lost its prestige in terms of power. I'm speaking about values and morals and the long run of a policy which is conducted and which leads to no positive ends. Yeah. The situation, I just...
You really believe this?
Yes, I do.
You really?
Those who supported the Americans, the United States in the Gulf War, are they better off now than they were in the 90s? Are they more secure? Are they better off economically? Are they stronger than they were in 1990? The answer is simple, no. So those who joined the United States in its campaign against Iraq actually lost. In terms of their own security, in terms of their own economy.
Give me one example of that.
All the Gulf.
No, just one example of one.
I don't want to call names.
Tell me one.
I don't want to call names.
But we're not talking about names. We're talking about one country that's worse off because of the Gulf War.
The whole Gulf area?
No, just name one country.
The whole Gulf area.
Just name one country that fits the standards that you just said.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows.
I don't. Tell me.
The Gulf area, the Gulf region, there are states there. Any person in the world knows whom those states are. But I don't want to use names.
You hope to come away from this visit to the United Nations, this appearance on my program, Mr. Koppel's program, Mr. King's program, others, with what result?
To explain my case. Answer questions, because there has been a lot of disinformation spread in this country, in the American media, about Iraq, about the realities on site. So I am doing my best to explain. Whether you take it or not, it's up to your judgment. I think this by itself is part of my mission.
On that, I thank you for coming. Thank you very much. The Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq, Tariq Aziz.